The way people eat is changing drastically. In the last 50 years, we had more changes than in the last 10,000 years. Innovations help us to fight hunger and make our lives more practical. In the past, a farmer was able to produce enough food to feed 6 to 8 people. And today, one farmer manages to produce food enough for 126 people. Leaving aside this efficiency, there are also big risks and hidden problems. When you go to the supermarket, do you know how to see the differences between the fruits of each season? This task is becoming increasingly difficult. The fruits and vegetables of specific seasons are now available throughout the entire year. This is a little bit curious, isn't it? But this is only a small indication of something much more disturbing that you will discover in this video. All the mechanical and chemical processes that the food industry uses take us away from the original concept of family farms. Over the years, multinational corporations make different acquisitions to increase the size of their empire, and these increase their productivity, reduce expenses, and increase profits. But there is a small detail in this process because there are also a few risks for you and for me, and we are the final consumer. These companies control everything, from the engineering of the seed to the final moment in which the product reaches our homes. In this process, adulteration of the product is quite frequent, and there is also a manipulation of the regulatory bodies and also the public opinion. In addition to all of this, there are also cases of animal and workers' abuse. Are you interested to know more? My name is Seiichi Arata from Natugood, and this is a summary from the documentary Food Inc. by Robert Kenner.
Attention! This content is provided with your agreement and understanding that it is only for information purposes and is not a medical service, nutritional service, or any other regulated service or a service that requires personal care and individualization. By proceeding, you agree to be fully responsible to have consultancy with the professionals of your trust and jurisdiction before making any decision. The ideas presented here may not be adequate to all individuals or specific situations. Anecdotes and case studies have a low hierarchical value in evidence-based medicine and are merely for illustration purposes. Each person is unique, and accordingly there is no guarantee or promise for specific results. This material is only a subjective interpretation summarizing the reference material and does not represent endorsement to any information. It is not the intention of this material to criticize the original reference work. This summary is not official, not approved, not licensed, nor in any manner related to the original reference source. If you are interested, check the affiliate links to have access to the sources and deepen your knowledge and also to support the original authors. The Not Too Good initiative welcomes you for also valuing education and valuing the qualified professional support to make conscious choices.
One of the most disturbing problems that we have is lack of information. And this is not happening because we consumers are not interested. For the many companies involved, it is quite good that the consumer doesn't know what's happening. And because of that, we have no idea what are the process involved, and that makes it a little bit more difficult for us to have better ideas and better decisions. One of the main concerns of Michael Pollan, who is the author of The Omnivore's Dilemma, is to inform his readers. And he explains to the general public how the food chain works. In the United States, most industrialized foods have one common origin: corn. The supermarket offers an illusion of diversity, but in reality, these markets are selling products from very few companies, and basically it's all the same thing. We'll talk about all the problems related to corn very soon, but before that, let's start our story looking at the food changes starting in the 1930s. At that time, we see a new type of restaurant emerging, the drive-thru. Food industrialization and the concentration of economic power. Some fast food places were able to reduce their expenses with the simplification of their process and mass production. The ones that had great global success were the ones reducing costs using simplification and mass production with highly skilled workforces. Each worker is specialized in very few activities, such as defrosting, frying, packing, receiving the payment, and giving change. Salaries are very low, and the task involved is extremely repetitive and simple. And this guarantees that anybody can do it. So it's quite easy to also fire those workers and put new people anytime they need. This makes everything better to work on a large scale. In other words, you have in here industry techniques of mass production being put into the restaurant chains. All of this helps to reduce the expenses, standardize the final product, And then also you have some new types of labor relations, low prices to the final consumer, and this all leads to great commercial success for these fast food restaurants. The result of this commercial success is that these fast food chains have huge economic power. These companies are the world's largest buyers of products like pork, potato, tomato, lettuce, apple, and chicken. This position allows them to dictate the rules in the entire food industry. In the 1970s, the five largest meat traders were controlling 25% of the US market. But today things are different. Currently, only four of them are able to control more than 80% of the market. In other words, only 3 or 4 companies today have basically the entire control of what happens in the whole meat production. The economic power of these companies also tends to increase because of intellectual property, with patents to help them protect their seeds and also to use legal mechanisms to prosecute the farmers who don't obey the large companies. Maybe even a farmer who does not want to be using patented technology and seeds can find himself in trouble if his neighbors are using those seeds and his own crops become accidentally contaminated. Even if he is innocent, he'll have to be paying very high fees for his lawyers to be supporting all the costs of the process, and maybe he will even have to settle if he does not have enough money to go until the end. We have never had a situation like this before. There is a huge concentration of power in the hands of very few companies. Large food companies determine how the farmers have to work. So now you may be asking yourself, why is this all relevant? See, when you have these very large buyers putting pressure on the producers, basically they can tell what they want in return. So the result is that the way the chickens are bred today is very different from what we had a few years ago. Today, you can see chicken ready to be consumed in half of the time compared to the production of chickens 50 years ago. But not only that, these chickens are twice as large. Just think about this. In 5 decades, the innovations allowed this chicken to grow 2 times more in half of the time. Just imagine your 9-year-old child with 3.5-meter high and weighing around 150 kilos. It's a little bit like that. The economic power of these buyers also changed the idea of the animal farmer, because the farmers today have to adapt themselves to the modern production techniques, otherwise they cannot stay in the market. And these farmers have to be doing everything that the big buyers are telling them to do by using new methods and buying new machines. There is a whole process of quality control to be sure that the final product all looks the same. So all these birds are kept in a very small space with a minimum of light inside. It's very dark. There is a whole series of secret techniques, and these companies do not allow any journalists to enter the place to see how is the environment where these animals are being created. There is a farmer, Joel Salatin, who understands that there is a reason why these companies do not want his production places to be recorded. He says that if we, consumers, would see what's happening, we would be extremely shocked. At the end of the day, the person who should actually be able to take care of the plantations and taking care of the animals should be the farmer himself. And these are the people who have all the traditional knowledge about the best ways to take care of animals and plants. And he is very unsatisfied with this entire situation because people who are deciding right now, they're just some executives in corporate rooms very far away from the life in the farm. The decisions are now being assigned by these big companies who just want to be seeing bigger, cheaper, and faster production. As a result of that, you see, for example, sometimes cows eating the remains of other animals, chicken manure, and corn. According to the farmer Carol Morrison, the fact that the hen today is growing in only 7 weeks makes a lot of problems. The organs of this chicken can't stand, the bones can't stand. This chicken cannot even walk because of their very heavy weight. These producers also have to be applying a lot of antibiotics to the offspring. The amount is so much that the bacteria acquire resistance to the point that the antibiotic does not work anymore. And then she says that people start to have all types of problems and allergies to these antibiotics. In order to renew the contracts for continue selling this chicken, the farmers are now being forced to buy more equipment, taking debt, and losing their bargaining power. Because if they don't do that, the large meat buyer will say that they are not interested to renovate the contract. And there are so many other ways that we can be very worried about these practices. For example, these companies are employing illegal immigrants, people who do not have the right documentation to be in the country. So these are people who really need the job. So they don't have another choice. They're taking very dangerous tasks without the right equipment of safety and accepting a very low salary, just enough to survive. And all of this demonstrates the way how the bad side of the food industry, represented by the big companies, is now changing the entire way how our food is being produced. Food engineering and corn. Do you remember at the beginning of the video we talked about the work of Michael Pollan? Alright, so in his work he tells us that the productivity of the corn plantation today is 10 times larger than it was a century ago. So this multiplication by a factor of 10, it's quite a big thing, and it happened because of a few changes in the technology. You have genetic engineering, you have fertilizers, you have pesticides, and other inventions. Currently, 30% of the land in the US destined for agriculture is used to be planting corn. So the country itself has a lot of regulations and laws to encourage an overproduction of corn. And this excess production is being stored, and then the industry starts to invent new techniques about, what can they do with all that corn? So first of all, they create methods to prevent corn from becoming rancid, old, and therefore unsuitable for the use. And one of the recent inventions is the high fructose corn syrup. In American supermarkets, about 90% of the products contain either corn or wheat or soy or one of these. And just to give you a few examples, ketchup, processed cheese, sweets, soda, peanut butter, all types of sauces, sweeteners, xanthan gum, fructose, sucrose, cellulose, and so many others. So also they have a lot of chemical components produced by the use of corn for all types of use. Corn is also used to feed animals. Chicken and pigs and cows and even fish are eating now rations made of corn. And these animals are not selected by the evolution to be eating corn as a natural food. But they have that because corn is very cheap, because of all the incentives from the government and also all this high production technology. And because of that, this corn is being used to make these animals fatter even faster. And the problem is that feeding corn to cows is causing problems with bacterium E. coli 0157H7. This problem gets even worse because when you look at the places of the slaughterhouses, the manure of these cows is being in contact with the meat. Barbara Kowalski is a civil rights advocate who fights to increase the quality of the food produced by the meat industry because her son died suddenly after eating a hamburger contaminated with E. coli. She shows us how much is still necessary to overcome the huge influence that these food industries have on the legislators and the health monitoring agencies. In order to increase the safety, the costs of production of meat will increase. But the question that we have right now is whether the law is currently protecting more the industry rather than the vulnerable consumer. The problem about searching for efficiency. There is this vicious circle that Michael Pollan identifies that the food production system will always try to become more and more efficient. For this reason, with each innovation, we will try to get more and more efficiency and open doors for new problems. He says that if you, for example, would remove corn from the food from these animals, in 5 days we could eliminate 80% of the E. coli bacteria. But that's not what the industry wants to do. They don't want to step back. When the industry understands that feeding, for example, corn is causing problems with some type of bacteria, they understand this problem and they want to add one extra layer of innovation, of more technology. And this, of course, will increase the complexity of the system even more and create possibilities for more problems. To reduce problems with E. coli, the meat industry even uses ammonium and ammonium hydroxide to kill these meat bacteria. Obesity and the household income. This meat entering our houses is the meat with ammonia. This should not be even used to feed animals. But it's a little bit wrong to be blaming consumers as if we consumers don't know how to choose food. Things are not so simple. If you take a look at a comparison of a meal with lots of sweets, fried food, soft drinks, fast food, you will notice that it can become much cheaper when you compare to have food with fresh vegetables. Because all these foods are being helped and subsidized by all types of incentives from the governments. Do you remember that the government gives a lot of incentives for the overproduction of corn? Well, the same thing happens for soy and wheat. So everything that is produced with soy and wheat and corn is becoming cheaper and of course is going to be the first choice for families with a low income. And Michael Pollan tells us that a diet with so much sugar and high fructose corn syrup and all those refined carbohydrates will do one thing. They will produce very high peaks of insulin and a whole depletion of the system that the body uses to metabolize that sugar. You probably saw this already in our course, Not a Good Weight Loss, in very much detail and what to do about it. If you haven't seen that yet, you can go to arata.se/leptin. 1 in every 3 Americans born after the year 2000 will have diabetes. And among minority groups, the groups with low income, 1 in 2 people, 50% of people, will have diabetes. You can influence this situation. One of the fastest growing areas is organic food. This is a response to all these types of concerns. We know that when food is too cheap because of all these subsidies and this aggressive productivity, at the end that cheap food will become very expensive. Expensive for the environment, expensive for our health. When you decide to buy directly from the local producer, when you are choosing good products from companies that you know who respect the environment, who respect the workers, respect the quality of the product, you are voting. And this is what the market needs. The market needs to see us making better choices. The moment these producers understand that the public wants more quality, more responsibility, they will deliver. And then all the commerce will change. Learn to cook at home. Avoid processed foods. Every time you can, go for fresh food. Read the labels. Plant a garden. Distribute information. Try to get more involved. The more we do that, the better our future will be.